people don't really ask writers of epic fantasy romance to expound on philosophy about society. People have become very upset, saying, well, it's just not fair that these characters who are familiars don't have rights because of an accident of birth. It's hard for me to understand why this is even controversial. This is Jeffe Kennedy, also writing as Jennifer K. Lambert, author of epic fantasy romance. Good morning, everyone. I'm here with my first cup of coffee. Ah, amazing. Today is, say it with me, people, it is Friday, woohoo, October 17th, 2025. And another week gone by. We're halfway through October. Tomorrow, No Kings protest, actually going to be happening all over the world. So, be one of those people if you can. Get our bodies out there. It's an interesting thing being a writer. How to put this? Like, I want to say I'm not your standard writer, which makes me sound like a pick-me girl. It's the other direction. Like there's this type of writer who is always on the talk shows and, like sort of, and I guess I'm associating them with male, but they're not. I mean, there are people like Heather Cox Richardson, right? Who are producing work, but they're also producing thoughtful commentary on society. And people don't really ask writers of epic fantasy romance to expound on philosophy about society, which is interesting because it's what we're writing about, right? I mean, when people ask me, I sometimes will be on panels, right? Like, why epic fantasy? And the thing is when you write fantasy, you get to create an alternate world. It doesn't have to be, but I write, second world fantasy, not our world. And you can play with the politics. You can create these new societies, religions, and you play out the politics. And it's all commentary on this society, the society we live in, I guess I should say. And there's been so much conversation in the social media writing circles about, like, oh, well, authors shouldn't say anything about their political beliefs, which I find absolutely absurd because, well, first of all, the people who say that are mainly the people who are conservative and they don't want anybody to argue with them. That's been a real starkly delineated in the last months, right? That the conservative types, the MAGA types, are very much in favor of free speech as long as it's their free speech, but they don't want people with opposing opinions to have free speech. It's the towing of the party line. It's the you only say the things that are approved by an authority, either governmental or religious. People who don't think that way I can actually understand where this comes from. It kind of goes back to childhood, to school, to employment. It's like, oh, well, you only do what the teacher says. You only echo what the teacher wants you to say. And if you're not doing that, if you're not coloring within those lines, then you are bad and wrong. And I know that a lot of conservative people feel that way. It's like, well, if you're not doing what my preacher said on Sunday, then you're wrong, because I know that's right. And there are a significant number of people who want to be told what's right and wrong. And I'm sort of circling my point here, I know, because I started out saying that it's interesting being a writer because it all comes out. Right? It's whatever is going on in my life or in my world, it does come through in the books. So I'm writing Magic Reborn, coming along very well past scene 3. I've got 37,000 words. If today is brilliant, I might end up with 40,000 words. I think Sydney hates me because she has to figure out, because I go from topic to topic and she has her nice headers, but now I've just mixed up topics. but it's all interrelated. That's the problem, Sydney. Uh, I did just get word that I'm going to get notes on Among the Thorns next week. That's pretty much, now you know exactly as much as I do. Notes next week. Could be Monday, could be Friday. I don't know. I wrote back and said, do you have a feeling for when you're going to want this back from me? And I have not yet heard. So I want you all to light a candle for me on this, or sacrifice your baked good of choice. Please, no animals. Whatever your little rituals are. By fantasy, my ideal choice is that they're going to say, if you could have it back to us by I can't even say it, by mid-December, this is what we want. This is the ideal. I'm really hoping that they don't want it back faster than that, and it's going to screw up the release of Magic Reborn. But that's what happens. So anyway, it's interesting being a writer because this stuff comes out. And so I'm writing Magic Reborn, and my characters ended up having this huge debate on good versus evil. How do you know that you're on the side of good? And this is intertwined with what I'm saying about these conversations on social media that the book circles have been having with the author shouldn't comment on politics, and people being distressed that someone who writes their favorite romantasy or epic fantasy, Rebecca Yarros, just because it's been very topical that Rebecca Yarros has come out condemning. It's hard for me to understand why this is even controversial, but condemning authoritarianism, fascism, the thing that we're going to be protesting around the world about. Uh, she has been very vocal that she does not agree with the Trump regime, the things that they're wanting to do. I mean, from a historical perspective, who knows what's going to happen tomorrow? Because apparently, Hegseth and Miller, nobody knows if like Trump is even like coherent enough to know what's going on. But they want to fire missiles from the sea across I-5 in California at Camp Pendleton to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the Marines, which is, by the way, not until November. And it's absolutely insane. Absolutely insane that we have a leadership that is talking about firing missiles at our own country. There are people like me, like Rebecca Yarros, very, very much against fascism. I really thought that we were all supposed to be against fascism, right? This is like, we learned this in school. Hitler was bad, Nazis are bad, genocide is bad, slavery is bad, and now we have this whole contingent of people who are like saying, "Oh well, no, because Jesus," and it's strange because a lot of the people who are truly followers of Christianity will point out that we have all of this rhetoric, things like firing missiles at people is not Christian, and it's the religion's gotten twisted, the politics have gotten twisted. Anyway, the thing is these things come out in the books, and it's amazing to me that the readers don't seem to get this, because like those complaining about Rebecca Yarros's politics, everybody else is like, well, did you actually read the books? Did you read what the books are about? And I don't know, people don't, or they slide it into their own belief system, which is why people somehow believe that Trump has become Christian when he never was. He's not about Christianity. He's about himself. No King's Day tomorrow. I think it's good if you feel safe enough to do it. Let's get our bodies out there and show that, you know, it's probably close to 80% of people do not want what is happening. So, and I'm wearing my Alexander Hamilton shirt today. I will never be satisfied. I would probably be satisfied if we could go back to like giving people health care and letting people live their lives, which is kind of what the characters had, conversation that they had, because it is an interesting question. How do you know that you're on the side of right? And that's something that the people who are the liberals that are now being called Antifa, right? Because anti-fascist. I'm loving all the memes of people posting their ancestors fighting in World War II, saying, like, here's my Antifa grandfather because we were fighting against fascism, right? One thing that we like to say is that we are on the right side of history, which I firmly believe that we are. We are on the right side of history. How do you know? How do you know that you're on the right side? Because there are all of these people on the MAGA side, on the alt-right side, who believe that they can tell that they are on the side of right because it's associated with Christianity, because Jesus, and because their pastors said so, or because their husband said so, or because President Trump says so. So people think, oh, well, this authority figure or this religion told me that this is the side of right, so that's what I'm going to go with. But if you are someone who finds that either you don't need an authority figure or want an authority figure to tell you what is the side of right, uh, and if you don't agree with what your authority figures are telling you, and I've been hearing, like people having to leave their churches and going no contact with their families, all this kind of thing, because they're like, no, I know that what people are saying is not right. So my characters have this debate of how do we know? How do we boil it down to whether or not in this conflict that's brewing, because this is like book 9, right? These are the books that started with Dark Wizard. So there was the first trilogy, Bonds of Magic, then the second trilogy, Renegades of Magic, third trilogy is Warriors of Magic. And for this last book, I have 6 points of view. I've brought everybody back, and it's going to be the final conflict and triumph. I promise that. We are going to defeat evil. And who is evil? Well, in this world, evil are the people that are wanting to keep familiars as basically slaves, second-class citizens, right? Yeah, slavery's so bad. This kind of, they're happy. We keep them fed and housed. It's really just horrible, insidious thinking. For those of you who have not read these books, in this world, there are wizards and there are familiars, and then there are people without magic. But everything in this world comes from having magic. There's no technology to speak of. It's all magically produced. So there are these high houses that specialize in various kinds of magic and make products. They're basically the corporations of our world. A wizard can both generate some magic and they can wield magic, so they express a lot of magic. Familiars aren't able to wield magic. They only generate it. So over time, society has moved into this paradigm where the familiars are paired with wizards, because familiars actually need wizards to tap their magic because they can't express it themselves. So it builds up and it becomes toxic. So I know a lot of people out there bounced off of Dark Wizard. Early on, I saw a lot of people say things like that the world was just too dark for them. And that, which I understand. I mean, oops, hitting the chimes in my gesturing. Yeah, definitely, like no stones thrown there. But I think it's really interesting because people have become very upset saying, well, it's just not fair that these characters who are familiars don't have rights because of an accident of birth. It's just a really dark world and that's not fair. And which just kind of flabbergasts me, because so much of what is going on is this persecution of people who are the way they are because of an accident of birth, right? You're born with a certain kind of skin color. You're born into a certain country. You're born into a certain level of poverty. You are born queer in some fashion or another. And I think a lot of the crux of the argument for conservative people is that somehow you could help that. I know that there are people who think that they would like chose to be born straight and white and wealthy, and that this is like what they deserve. They don't regard it as an accident of fate, and that somehow people who are poor or who are queer or who are of color or from terrible circumstances, that somehow they chose that and it's their own darn fault. It's very strange thinking to me. So that's the thing about this world, though, is that familiars are really stuck. They end up being basically batteries for wizards. The wizards tend to be very power hungry because I think power corrupts, and more power corrupts more. So, yeah, this is like what's maybe going to change. And this is what they're debating. And it comes down to, really basic philosophy. We could come back to like the good place and so forth. But it's the you have to take as the premise that everybody is a person and deserves to get to live their life the way they want to live it, which I realize a lot of conservative thinkers think that's not true. I knew this one guy who thought that he was like really super enlightened, and that meant that he could manipulate and use other people to serve his life because they weren't doing anything with their lives anyway. And this may come from like that dark triad personality, but there are people who think, well, other people aren't as special as I am, aren't as good as I am, and therefore it's perfectly okay for me to take what they have or take away what they have, or it's important to me that they follow the rules. I want to make everybody follow the rules of my religion. Um, and to me, that's the difference. That's where it comes out. So when we talk about what is fascism, right? Because a lot of people use the word without knowing what it means. So here is a simple definition. This is from Merriam-Webster. A populist political philosophy, movement, or regime that exalts nation and often race above the individual, that is associated with a centralized autocratic government headed by a dictatorial leader, and that is characterized by severe economic and social regimentation and by forcible suppression of opposition. All of those words strung together keep saying that this is about people controlling other people and wanting to be the ones who have everything and take things away from others by force if necessary. And so that is how you know that fascism is on the side of wrong, and that fighting this is the thing to do. Tell you what, let's go back to having a democracy, and then I will stop talking politics and start talking about things like cats in New Mexico weather again. So, on that note, I am going to get to work, get as much done. Think good thoughts for that, like mid-December. I mean, I'm not even going to hope for late December, but that would be awesome if I, like, back after the holidays, if I could get this back. Awesome, mid-December. And yeah, we'll see. Maybe I'll know by Tuesday. In the meanwhile, you all have a great weekend, and I will talk to you all on Tuesday. You all take care. Bye-bye.